The tears streamed down Zara Nolan's face, catching the golden light of the setting sun as she sat among the wildflowers. Her white wedding dress spread around her like a fallen cloud in the vast Colorado meadow. She hadn't noticed the approaching hoofbeats until they stopped, and a shadow fell across her tear-stained face. Quinn Lawson dismounted his chestnut mare with the practiced ease of a man who'd spent most of his 26 years in the saddle. He stood for a moment, taking in the peculiar sight of a bride alone and crying in a meadow miles from town. Without a word, he removed his worn leather hat and placed it gently on the ground beside her, then lowered himself down into the grass. "Folks generally don't wear wedding dresses to cry in meadows," he said softly, his voice carrying the slight rasp of trail dust. "Unless the wedding didn't quite work out." Zara looked up, startled by the stranger's presence. His face was sun-bronzed and weathered, but his eyes were the sort of kindness she hadn't seen in months. "He didn't show up," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everyone was there, my family, our friends, the entire town of Silver Creek and Jackson. He just wasn't." Quinn nodded slowly, plucking a blade of grass and rolling it between his fingers. "That's mighty poor behavior, even by outlaw standards." The year was 1875, and Silver Creek was just another small mining town trying to establish itself in the Colorado Territory. Zara had come west with her family 3 years earlier, following the promise of silver and a new beginning after the financial panic of '73 had wiped out her father's business back east. "I waited 2 hours," she continued, her voice strengthening with indignation. 2 hours in that stifling church while people whispered and my father grew more furious by the minute. Finally, I couldn't bear it anymore. I took my horse and just rode." Quinn studied her for a moment. "That takes courage. Most would have hidden away." Zara laughed bitterly. "Is it courage or cowardice to run from all those pitying faces?" She smoothed her hand over the delicate lace of her dress, now stained with grass and dirt. "I saved for this dress for a year. Ordered it special from Denver." "It's a mighty fine dress," Quinn offered, though he knew little about women's fashion. He'd been on cattle drives most of his adult life with little time for social niceties or courtship. "What am I supposed to do now?" Zara asked, not really expecting an answer from this stranger. "Face everyone tomorrow, pretend I'm not completely humiliated." Quinn reached for his hat, turning it in his hands thoughtfully. "Way I see it, you've got 2 choices. You can go back and let them think you're broken. Or," he paused, his blue eyes meeting hers, "you can go back with your head high and show them you're made of stronger stuff." The wind picked up, sending ripples through the meadow grass and tugging at Zara's carefully arranged hair until several strands came loose, dancing around her face. In the distance, thunder rumbled. "Storm's coming," Quinn observed, rising to his feet and extending a hand to her. "My camp's not far. You can wait it out there if you'd like, miss." "Zara," she supplied, hesitating only briefly before placing her hand in his. "Zara Nolan." "Quinn Lawson," he replied, helping her to her feet. "Been driving cattle up from Texas. My crew's camped by the river about a mile east." Zara glanced down at her ruined wedding dress. "I'm hardly dressed for a cattle camp, Mr. Lawson." A rare smile crossed his face, transforming his serious features. "I reckon those cowboys have seen stranger sights, but not many as pretty." The compliment, spoken so matter-of-factly, brought an unexpected blush to Zara's cheeks. She allowed him to help her onto his horse, then watched as he gathered the reins of her own mount that was grazing nearby. As they rode toward his camp, the sky darkened ominously. Quinn remained silent, but Zara found his presence oddly comforting. There was something solid about him, reliable in a way that Jackson had never been, though she'd been too blinded by charm to see it. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as they reached the camp, where several men were hurriedly securing supplies. They looked up in surprise at the sight of their trail boss returning with a woman in a wedding dress. "Boys," Quinn said by way of introduction, "this is Miss Nolan. She'll be waiting out the storm with us." His tone made it clear that no questions would be tolerated. An older man with a gray-streaked beard approached, tipping his hat politely. "Madam," he said, "I'm Ellis. Cook for this sorry outfit. Got a tent you can use to stay dry." "Thank you," Zara replied, finding herself touched by the immediate acceptance from these rough men. The storm broke in earnest as Quinn led her to a small canvas tent. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it's dry. It's perfect," she assured him, ducking inside. She sat on a bedroll, listening to the rain hammer against the canvas, and for the first time since fleeing the church, she felt the tight band of anxiety around her chest begin to loosen. Outside, she could hear Quinn giving instructions to his men, his voice steady and calm amid the storm's fury. So different from Jackson's flamboyant speeches and grandiose promises he'd apparently never intended to keep. When Quinn returned, he brought a tin cup of hot coffee and a worn blanket. "Thought you might be cold," he said, handing her both items before settling himself just outside the tent opening, his back to her. "You don't have to sit in the rain, Mr. Lawson," Zara said, sipping the strong, bitter coffee gratefully. "Quinn," he corrected, "and I'm fine here." "Wouldn't be proper otherwise." Zara smiled to herself, touched by his old-fashioned sense of propriety. "Where are you taking your cattle?" she asked. "Denver. Got buyers waiting. After that, I'm not sure," he paused. "Been thinking about settling somewhere maybe." 10 years on the trail is enough for any man. "What's stopping you?" He was quiet for so long that Zara thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Never found a place that felt right, I suppose, or a reason good enough to stop moving." They talked through the storm, Quinn sharing tales of life on the trail, stampedes and thunderstorms, river crossings gone wrong, the beauty of dawn breaking over the prairie. Zara found herself laughing despite the day's heartbreak, drawn to his quiet strength and unexpected eloquence when describing the land he loved. By the time the rain stopped, she realized she'd told him more about herself than she'd ever shared with Jackson: her dreams of opening a dressmaking shop, her love of books, her disappointment when her father insisted she marry rather than pursue her own ambitions. "He thought Jackson would provide security," she explained. "After losing everything in Pennsylvania, that matters more to him than anything." Quinn nodded. "Hard times make for hard choices, but a father shouldn't sell his daughter's happiness even for security." "I went along with it," Zara admitted. "I convinced myself I could love Jackson eventually. Maybe this was a blessing in disguise." As twilight settled over the camp, Ellis prepared a simple supper of beans, salt pork, and sourdough biscuits. The Cowboys, initially awkward around Zara, gradually relaxed as she showed genuine interest in their work and shared humorous stories of town life. "Miss Nolan," one young cowboy named Teddy ventured, "if you don't mind my saying, that fellow who didn't show today must be the biggest fool in the Colorado Territory." A chorus of agreement rose from the men, and Zara felt a warm glow of appreciation for these strangers who'd shown her more kindness in a few hours than her fiancé had in months of courtship. Later, as the men settled around the campfire with coffee and tobacco, Quinn approached Zara. "I should get you back to town. Your family will be worried." The thought of returning to Silver Creek, facing the gossip and pity, made Zara's stomach clench with dread. Would it be possible to stay the night? I'm not ready to face everyone yet." Quinn studied her face in the firelight. "You can have my tent. I'll bunk with Ellis." "Thank you," she said softly. "I know this is an imposition." He shook his head. "No imposition. Sometimes a person needs a little time before facing the music." That night, wrapped in Quinn's blankets that smelled of leather and pine, Zara slept more soundly than she had in weeks. She dreamed not of Jackson's handsome face and empty promises, but of wide open spaces and a quiet man with kind eyes who'd laid his hat beside her when she needed it most. Morning came with the rich aroma of coffee and the sounds of the camp stirring to life. Zara emerged from the tent to find Quinn already saddled up, ready to escort her back to town. "You didn't have to wait," she said, brushing down her crumpled dress self-consciously. "I did," he replied simply, handing her a tin cup of coffee. As they rode toward Silver Creek, the rising sun painting the mountains gold and pink, Zara felt a strange reluctance growing within her. She wasn't ready for this brief interlude to end. "Will you stay in town a while?" she asked. "After you deliver your cattle to Denver," Quinn glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Wasn't planning to, but plans can change." The town came into view, smoke rising from chimneys against the morning sky. Zara tensed, imagining the scene at home, her father's anger, her mother's tears, the neighbors' whispers. Quinn seemed to sense her apprehension. "Would you like me to speak with your father?" The offer touched her deeply. "No, but thank you, this is my battle to fight." They stopped at the edge of town, hidden from view by a stand of cottonwoods. Quinn dismounted and helped Zara down from her horse, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him. "For everything," he nodded, suddenly awkward. "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing to me," Zara insisted. Before she could reconsider, she stood on tiptoe and pressed a gentle kiss to his weathered cheek. "Goodbye, Quinn Lawson." As she turned to leave, he caught her hand. "Zara." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved wooden flower. "Made this while you were sleeping. Not much, but—" Zara took the delicate carving, feeling the smooth surface under her fingers. "It's beautiful." "I'll be in Denver for 2 weeks," he said. If you wanted to write." She clutched the wooden flower tightly. "I'll write." With that promise hanging between them, Zara mounted her horse and rode into town, her head held high despite her tear-stained wedding dress and tangled hair. The reunion with her family was exactly as difficult as she'd expected. Her father, Theodore Nolan, alternated between rage at Jackson's betrayal and disappointment in Zara for disappearing overnight. Her mother simply wept, certain that her daughter's reputation was ruined beyond repair. "Where were you?" her father demanded for the 3rd time. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "I spent the night in a cowboy camp," Zara replied calmly, watching her father's face turn purple with shock. "They were perfect gentlemen, every one of them. Showed me more respect than Jackson ever did." "This is precisely why young women need husbands," Theodore sputtered. "Your judgment is clearly impaired." Zara stood her ground. "My judgment was impaired when I agreed to marry a man who didn't love me because you thought it was a good match. I won't make that mistake again." In the days that followed, Zara weathered the storm of gossip with unexpected resilience. The story of Jackson's disappearance grew more dramatic, with each telling he'd run off with a saloon girl. He'd been killed in a gambling dispute. He'd been revealed as a wanted man and fled before the law caught up with him. A week after the failed wedding, the truth emerged. Jackson had indeed fled, but not alone. He'd emptied the accounts of several businesses where he'd insinuated himself as a bookkeeper, including her father's store, and disappeared with nearly $5,000. The scandal shifted overnight. No longer was Zara the abandoned bride. She was the fortunate woman who'd escaped marriage to a thief. Still, her father's business was in jeopardy, and the family's financial situation grew dire once again. 2 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, Zara sat at her small desk, penning a letter to Quinn. She told him everything: the revelation of Jackson's crimes, her family's financial troubles, her decision to pursue her dream of opening a dressmaking shop despite her parents' objections. "I find myself thinking of our conversations by the campfire," she wrote. "How you describe the feeling of knowing when something is right. I believe my shop is right for me, even if the path forward isn't clear yet." She hesitated, pen poised above the paper, then added, "I find myself thinking of you too, more often than I should perhaps admit in a letter." 3 days later, Zara was working in her father's store when the bell above the door jangled. She looked up to see Quinn Lawson standing in the doorway, trail dust still clinging to his clothes, her letter visible in his shirt pocket. "You're supposed to be in Denver," she said, her heart suddenly racing. "Sent my foreman ahead with the herd," he replied, removing his hat. "Had more important business here." Theodore Nolan emerged from the back room, eyeing the tall cowboy suspiciously. "Can I help you, sir?" Quinn straightened his shoulders. "Mr. Nolan, my name is Quinn Lawson. I've come to discuss a business proposition." Over the next hour, in the store's small back office, Quinn laid out his proposal. He had savings from 10 years of driving cattle, substantial savings that he'd been holding onto for the right investment. He believed in Zara's vision for a dressmaking shop and wanted to finance it as a partner. "You don't even know if I can sew," Zara protested when her father left them alone briefly. Quinn's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Didn't come back just for a business investment, Zara. That's just the part your father needs to hear right now." "Why did you come back?" she asked softly. He looked at her steadily. "Because in 10 years of drifting, I never found a place that felt right. Then I met a woman crying in a meadow, and suddenly staying in one place didn't seem so constraining anymore." Over the following months, as summer turned to autumn, Zara's shop took shape in a small storefront on Silver Creek's Main Street. Quinn purchased a modest ranch outside town and began building a life that didn't involve constant movement. They worked together daily, Zara creating beautiful garments that soon attracted customers from neighboring towns. Quinn managing the business side and gradually learning the settlement patterns of the valley with an eye toward expanding his small cattle operation. Their courtship progressed slowly, mindful of Zara's recent heartbreak and the town's tendency toward gossip. They took Sunday rides into the foothills, shared meals with her family, and spent countless evenings planning their intertwined futures. On Christmas Eve, 6 months after their first meeting, Quinn invited Zara to ride with him to his ranch. Fresh snow blanketed the landscape, and their horse's breath formed clouds in the crisp air. When they reached the ranch house, Zara gasped. The simple cabin was transformed, evergreen boughs adorned the porch, and through the windows, she could see candles glowing inside. A small tree decorated with paper stars and pine cones stood in the corner. The table was set for dinner, and a fire crackled in the hearth. "Quinn, it's beautiful," she breathed. He took her hands in his. "I've been thinking about what you said that day in the meadow about what you're supposed to do when things don't work out as planned." Zara smiled at the memory. "You told me I had 2 choices, let people think I was broken or show them I'm made of stronger stuff. You chose the harder path," he said softly. "You built something from nothing. You're the strongest person I know, Zara Nolan." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. "I'm not offering security or stability, though I'll do my best to provide both. What I'm offering is a partnership in business, in life, in everything that matters." He opened the box to reveal a ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I'm offering my heart if you want it." Tears filled Zara's eyes, but unlike the tears she'd shed in the meadow, these were born of joy. "I do want it. I want you, Quinn Lawson." Their wedding, held the following spring, bore little resemblance to the lavish affair that had been planned with Jackson. They exchanged vows in the same meadow where they'd first met, surrounded by wildflowers and a small gathering of family and friends. Zara wore a simple dress of ivory silk that she'd designed and sewn herself, with Ellis proudly serving as Quinn's best man and the Cowboys from that fateful night forming an honor guard. Theodore Nolan, who had come to respect his son-in-law's quiet integrity and business acumen, walked his daughter across the meadow with tears in his eyes. "I was wrong," he whispered before giving her away. "Security isn't everything, happiness is." As they spoke their vows, Quinn placed his beloved hat on the ground beside them, a reminder of that first day, when a heartbroken bride and a lonely cowboy found each other against all odds. "I never believed in fate," Quinn said, his voice carrying across the meadow, "until I found you crying here. Now I know some trails are meant to cross." In the years that followed, their partnership flourished. Zara's dressmaking business expanded to include a thriving mail-order catalog for frontier women who craved a touch of elegance in their hardscrabble lives. Quinn's ranch grew steadily, his careful stewardship of the land earning respect throughout the territory. They faced challenges, harsh winters that threatened the herd, economic downturns that affected the shop, the normal strains of building a life together in a land that demanded resilience. But they faced each obstacle as they had from the beginning together, with unwavering support for each other's dreams. 2 years after their wedding, Zara gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Alina after Quinn's mother. She grew up learning both to ride and to sew, equally at home on the ranch and in the shop. A son, Thomas, followed 3 years later, completing their family. On their 10th anniversary, Quinn took Zara back to the meadow where they'd first met. They spread a blanket among the wildflowers, now accompanied by their children, who ran laughing through the tall grass. "Do you ever think about that day?" Zara asked, watching Alina teach her younger brother how to make daisy chains. "What might have happened if you hadn't come along when you did?" Quinn took her hand, the same strong, steady hand that had helped her up from the ground a decade earlier. "I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." Zara leaned against his shoulder, content in the knowledge that her greatest heartbreak had led to her greatest joy. "I'm glad it was you who found me that day. I'm glad it was your hat beside me in the grass. And my heart," Quinn added softly, kissing her temple, "always my heart." As the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the meadow gold just as it had that first evening, their children returned to the blanket, faces flushed with exertion and happiness. Quinn pulled out his old guitar, a skill he'd cultivated during long evenings on the trail, and began to play a gentle melody. Alina and Thomas settled against their parents, and the family of 4 watched the stars emerge one by one above the Colorado wilderness. Zara looked around at the life they'd built together, so different from anything she could have imagined on that tear-stained day, yet so perfectly right. "I love you, Quinn Lawson," she whispered. "Thank you for laying your hat beside me that day." His eyes, still kind after all these years, met hers with the same steady gaze that had first given her courage. "Best decision I ever made," he replied, "and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." In the meadow where their story began, surrounded by the family they'd created, Zara and Quinn watched night fall over the land they both loved, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with tears and end with stars.